What's up guys and welcome back to Moaning. If you guys are new here, then what is up? My name is Erica. Heya, how you doing? If you're into the history of the ancient Greeks and the Romans, maybe you're just into the mythology, and maybe you're just here to hear about another strong female character in the Odyssey, well then this is not only the video for you, this is also the channel for you. You guys are going to want to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you know every single time I post in the future. But on the topic of today's video, and as you can see from the title, we're going to be going into the Odyssey Book 7. So if I could summarize Book 7 into a one sentence, it would be that Nausicaa's mama comes to the rescue. So I mentioned at the end of the last episode, at the end of episode 6, Book 6 even, it's actually episode 7, either way. So at the end of Book 6, I mentioned that we were going to meet Nausicaa's mother. Nausicaa's mother is a strong female character, not because she necessarily does anything important, it's just because she holds the power in the kingdom. As we said in the last book, she's going to be the one to grant Odysseus his safe passage home. She's going to be the one to do all of that, not the king. So that is why she's powerful. She's a woman of very few words, and that's actually okay, because I like that she doesn't have to say that much, and yet she still holds the authority. But anyways, this is me rambling. Let's go into the book, and let's just detail the narrative for you guys. So, Book 7 opens with Odysseus. He's doing his little prayer thing and whatever, right? But we cut to Nausicaa. So Nausicaa approaches the palace, and as she starts disembarking from the wagon with all of the laundry and everything, her brothers come out of the palace, and also all of these maids and servants come to help her get everything out of the wagon, to bring the horses around, to, you know, literally remove the wagon from being outside the door, because that's kind of inconvenient. And then she goes inside and she eats and everything like that. And as she has gone inside, we then cut back to Odysseus, who has now got the brilliant idea where he is going to make his way into the palace as he was instructed, well, through the city gates first and then onto the palace. So as he starts to leave the grove, Athena sees him and she decides once again she's going to help him out, right? She has literally helped this man so much up until this point. So she infuses him with this kindness, with this generosity, but also shrouds him in a mist, right? So he's now invisible. This was a common thing in the Iliad, where the gods would come down and they would protect their favorites or their children by shrouding them in a mist, and that happens right now. So Athena shrouds, she's not his mother, by the way, just to clarify that, because I realize how that might have sounded, just his favorite. So Odysseus starts walking, he's invisible, and he comes across this little girl. Now the little girl is actually Athena in disguise, right? So Athena is going to help him out in the form of this mortal, so he doesn't know it's Athena. And he says to this little girl, like, hey, do you happen to know where the palace is? Can you help lead me there? Because I need to talk to the king there. Now this is a callback to the previous book where Nausicaa said, a child knows where the palace is. Don't worry, you won't get lost. You can ask anybody and they will help you get to the palace once I'm already there. So this isn't actually that weird. Like, it sounds really weird when you're explaining it, but given the previous book, just watch that episode because I swear this will make way more sense. Athena in disguise though, it's like, yeah, sure man, no problem. Funny you should ask me, because my dad is actually neighbors with Alcinous and neighbors with the palace and neighbors with the family. So of course I will lead you back there. And she actually tells him this really interesting thing about the Phaeacians, where she says that they are not people who like visitors. They don't like hosting. They don't like this whole, not that they don't like hospitality, but they're not used to it, because we need to remember that they are literally on the edge of the world, right? So they are not used to hosting people. People don't come to them. Nausicaa even made this comment saying that they never get people from afar who come to Scheria to visit them, to talk to them. And so they're not really the most welcoming of people. And Athena says that's fine though, because they do value their ships more than they value people, and that is because the ships were a gift from Poseidon. So that is what she tells him in this moment, which I think is very interesting. And then they start walking, right? So they start walking through city gates and all of this. So no one sees them though. No one sees Odysseus. And finally, when they get outside of the palace itself, Athena in disguise turns around to him and she says, this is it. This is where you want to be. Everybody that you need is going to be inside there. And she reiterates to him that he has to go straight to Arete. She's like, this is a woman who's called Arete, which in Greek means excellence, right? If you are kind of familiar with that word, then you might have read Aristotle. He uses this term in his philosophy. So she supposedly, according to Athena in disguise, she has really earned this title. She's really earned this name because she is so generous, and she's the one who holds all the power, and she grants all of the people their prayers. So this is the female empowerment moment, that it's not the king is not being put on this pedestal, Arete is. So she advises him that when he goes into the palace, that he needs to be brave, he needs to be bold, he needs to be confident, because otherwise this isn't gonna work, right? And she highlights that he has to go in and be confident, or else nobody is going to believe him and nobody is going to want to help him, which I love. It's like this little life lesson that's been thrown in there, which is like, just go into things and just be confident, be bold, and you will succeed. And I really like that as like a general message from the book, not the point of this actual book, but anyways. So she tells him that, and she actually gives us well, she gives us sort of like a rundown on the family tree of how the Phaeacians as a people came to be, which the only important part that you really need to know is that there's this guy called Nausicaa, who is like the first person in this family tree that really matters. He ends up having two kids. The 2 kids, one is Alcinous, who's the king, and one is this guy called Rhexenor. Now, Arete is Rhexenor's daughter, so he didn't actually end up having any sons, and he ended up being killed himself by Apollo for various reasons. Again, if you want that story, then go to the book itself, because I'm not sitting here and doing it. And so Alcinous actually married his niece. But anyway, she tells him all of this, and then she leaves. So we know that Athena then leaves. She goes to Marathon, she goes to Athens, and Odysseus is left standing outside the palace, the greatness of the palace. Now we get this very long description of what the palace looks like. And I mean down to like the freaking doorknobs. Like literally everything is described in detail to the point where you don't need to know it. But Homer is painting a really vivid image of what this palace looks like, and it goes on for ages. So I'm, again, not going to sit here and describe that to you. If you need to know what the palace looks like, then read the goddamn book. Because even I, like, now that I've read it so many times, I skip over this part because I'm just like, I get it. Hephaestus made this, and like this was a gift from this god, and this was a, it's not terribly interesting. However, it does help you understand why Odysseus has to stand there for a hot second and he takes it all in, right? He's like totally in awe by what this palace looks like. He's like, holy these people are rich. He eventually starts walking in. Once he's kind of gotten used to what it looks like, he starts to walk in. And remember, he's still shrouded in this mist. So he walks into the palace and he walks straight into the center room where he knows that everybody's going to be because Athena told him that's where everybody was going to be. So he walks in there, sees Arete sitting down on her throne, and he runs over to her. Like he literally runs over to her, drops down to his knees and clasps her legs, which is exactly what he's supposed to do. He has to supplicate her. As we said, he's got to walk right past Alcinous, which he does. But unfortunately, the mist only, comes off him when he's right in front of Arete. So imagine Arete's sitting there and all of a sudden a man appears at her knees and she's like, what the is going on? And everyone is looking over at them being like, did anyone see? No, do we know where he came from? No, okay, weird. Our security needs to be like much better than this. But before any of them can get a word out, Odysseus is just begging with her and he's basically saying, can you please accept me into your palace? I need to explain where I've come from, like all of this horrible stuff that's been happening to me. I need to get home. Please, can you help me in all of this? And he's just begging. Like he's literally on his hands and he's begging to this woman who hasn't said anything at this point. She's just looking at him being like, I don't know where you came from. And finally, when he's done, he does sit back away from her knees and he sits back on the floor and this random old guy pops up from the corner and he's just like, hey, Alcinous, there's this guest and he's on your floor and that's totally indecent. We should probably feed him. That sounds like a good idea. And then we can figure out what to do with him. And Alcinous is like, that's actually a really good idea. Why don't we all sit around the table and feast? So they all sit down at the table and Alcinous moves his favorite son so that Odysseus can sit in that spot, which I don't know how that son took that, but like I personally wouldn't take it very well. But either way, he's like, you sit the over there, our guest is sitting in this seat. Odysseus sits down, he does the whole, like washing of the hands thing, where they like pour water over a basin, they like rinse their hands, and then he starts eating all of the appetizers and all of this stuff. And Alcinous tells all of them that what they're going to do is they're going to feast with Odysseus, and then because it's super late, they're all going to go to bed afterwards. He's like, we're just going to eat, we're going to, make sure our guest is well fed and he's not dying, that would be great. And then everybody's going to go back to their homes and they are all going to go to bed, and then tomorrow we'll reconvene for an assembly and we'll decide then, not decide, but we will help him get home. We will get him a ship. We will get him all these things. So just enjoy the feast for now and we'll come back and make a proper decision. We'll make a proper plan in the morning. Obviously, there are sacrifices thrown into this and like offerings that are thrown into this and all of those sorts of mentions. But Alcinous does finish up by saying that he's like a really cool dude, clearly, because he's come all the way here. He did everything right, but it's not their duty to keep him there. And he says that. That's why he says in the morning they're going to do all this stuff, because he says it's not his fate to stay here. It's our job to send him home, and then he'll suffer whatever fate he's supposed to suffer when he gets home, or like not on these shores. He's like, that is not our job, unless he's a god, in which case we have no idea what he's doing here. And, the gods work in really weird ways, but if he happens to be an immortal, I would also believe that too. So let's treat him well, is sort of the whole point of Alcinous' speech. And Odysseus literally stops him in his tracks. He interrupts and he's like, Alcinous, I am not a god. Like, don't say anything like that. I'm just a regular ass dude. A depressed dude, because I've struggled a lot, but a regular dude nonetheless. He asks Alcinous if he can eat first, and then he'll explain his story, maybe in the morning when everybody comes back. And all of the men who are at the table, they like cheer and they clap and they're like, yeah, and they drink even more and they, feast even more. And at the end of the night, they all go home, right? This is just like a fast forwarded version. They all go home. And it's just Alcinous, Arete, and Odysseus who are left at the table. So Arete looks over, and this is the first time that she's spoken in the whole book. She looks over to him and she says, I don't know who you are, but you are wearing clothing that I have made and that I made for my sons. So I'm curious as to how you got them and who you are. That is just like a piece of power right there. She doesn't accuse him of anything. She's very calm. It's the first time that she's spoken, and I'm just like, what a freaking boss that she's just like, I know those clothes. Please tell me what's going on, because I'm going to react very quickly, and I need you to explain this before I get mad. Odysseus goes into the story about how he ended up where he is on Scheria. So he starts off with saying that all of his men have died at sea. He then washes up on Calypso's island. Basically everything that we've read up until book 5, up until now, he explains, you know, moving from Calypso's island to then getting on the sea, and then on the 18th day seeing the shores of Scheria, and then having to swim there, and then sleeping in the woods, and then meeting Nausicaa, and all of this sort of stuff. He explains all of that to them, which most importantly explains why he has the clothing that he has on his body. Alcinous then speaks up when he's done, and he says that, you know, the little part that he just told him is like a really good story. He's like, that's amazing. However, he doesn't like how Nausicaa didn't lead Odysseus to the palace. He says, my daughter did everything right up until getting to that point. So she was very great. She was very hospitable. She was very respectable when meeting you at the river. But if she was going to do her job correctly as like a princess, she would have led you here herself. And it's quite funny because that's something that actually Nausicaa specifically said that no one would appreciate from her. So you've got to think that she was basically, it didn't matter what Nausicaa did, someone was going to be mad at her. Like if she had walked into the city with Odysseus, no doubt what her father said would have been like, she shouldn't have done that. But he kind of likes Odysseus at this point, so he's like, no, she definitely should have led you here, whatever. Poor Nausicaa, basically, because she played all of her cards right. And Odysseus acknowledges this, and he actually sticks up for her. This is a really interesting moment. So Odysseus says to Alcinous that he should not try and fault Nausicaa because she's flawless. He's like, your daughter is phenomenal and she's amazing and she did all these things for me, and I would be so lucky to marry a woman like that or whatever. But it was his decision. He highlights that it was his decision to not walk into the city with her because he didn't want her to be looked down on by the people. And that's really interesting because he's lying in this moment. Like, we know he's lying because Nausicaa is the one who was like, don't you dare walk through those city gates with me because I will hit you, because it will ruin my reputation and my father's reputation and all of that. Don't you dare follow me. And Odysseus now is saying that it was actually his idea, and he's doing it to protect Nausicaa, which is actually a moment that a lot of people have spun to be like, look, he's a liar, he's literally lying. And I don't see it that way. I see it as him saying Nausicaa was such a good person to him. She was such a help to him. She gave him, you know, the clothes on his back. She gave him food to eat. She led him to the city of the Phaeacians. And her dad is still trying to hate on her. Like, she didn't do anything wrong. And so he's going to take the brunt of that. And so he says, no, don't hate on Nausicaa. That was me. That was all me. And so I love him for that. Alcinous accepts this as the truth though, and he's just like, oh, well, in that case, like, then it's fine. Then Nausicaa did a great job. Alcinous then follows this up by saying that he's going to give Odysseus all of these great gifts to take with him home. And in the morning, they're going to give him a boat with all of these sailors that he's then going to have in order to go on home to Ithaca. That he says that they're going to see, Odysseus is going to see how good the Phaeacians are at sailing. He's like super excited by this because he's just like, this is what we were made to do and I can't wait to help you. Odysseus then says thank you, obviously. He's just like, that's really nice of you. I'm really tired though. Can I go to bed? Alcinous is like, yeah, sure. So Arete has her maids make up a bed for him, like on the porch, so that he can sleep comfortably throughout the night. And Odysseus says that in the morning he'll explain further, and tomorrow he's going to explain his whole story a little bit further in more detail to them, because he wants them to understand where he has come from and why he needs to go home so quickly. And that's the end of the book. It's not a very long one. These 2 books that we've just done are not very long, and that's because we're about to just snap into the flashback part of the whole Odyssey, which is very long because we're going to hear how Odysseus got from Troy up to Calypso's island. So we're going to fill in that blank in the books to follow for the next couple of books, which I'm like super excited about. So we're going to be doing that, not necessarily the next book, but in the next few chapters, starting from chapter 9, we will get to filling in that blank, which I'm super excited about. And yeah, that's the end of the book. That's the end of book 7. So thank you guys for tuning in to this episode. We will be seeing you next time for book 8, obviously, because that's what follows 7. So we'll be seeing you then with more Odyssey content here on Monique. We'll see you then.